Welcome to The Signal, where we bring you curated insights every week from the most brilliant founders, investors, and thought leaders in Web3. Find out their stories, how they see today's landscape, and what they think the future holds. This podcast is powered by the Collective Solution, an invite-only experience for the most innovative minds in Web3. Your host, Tyrone. Super excited to introduce our next guest. Many of you may have already heard of him if you've been in the Web3 space for a while. The founder of Zeneca and the exclusive 333 Club, a very special guest, the one, the only, Zeneca. Extremely passionate about education, writing, and like myself, we seem to have a keen interest in Stoic philosophy and Zen Buddhism. Tell us a little bit more about that. Let's just start there, actually.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Stoic philosophy, that's a great place to start. I'm happy to start there. Well, let me start with the name Zeneca. It is my screen name. I created it in March of 2021 when I was getting into NFTs and crypto and Twitter, it being a thing that you have to sort of have an account on and follow in this space. And I needed a name. And so I looked around my desk and I had a book by Seneca, the Stoic philosopher. And I was like, that sounds cool. I didn't want to just use Seneca. Seneca was already taken. And then I just thought for a couple of minutes. And I also like, Buddhism and Zen and that lifestyle. And so amalgamation, Zeneca came together. And then I was 33 years old at the time. So I went Zeneca 33. And yeah, I mean, Stoic philosophy, I started reading back in 2015, 2016, I think, which I actually had a book, Letters from a Stoic by Seneca, since I think 2011, but I didn't actually get around to reading it till 2015 to 16, and I just couldn't put it down. No, I bought it. It was a recommendation from someone else, and those sometimes you go through those buying book frenzies where you get really invigorated and you're like, I'm gonna read 100 books a year, 50 books a year. You go on Amazon and there's discounts and you go, okay, and you order 20 books and then you have a huge stack of them, and maybe for a few weeks you're doing great, a couple of months you read half of them, and then the rest they pile up. And so it was during one of those frenzies that I bought it, and I didn't get around to reading it till a few years later, and was just hooked. Every single page just resonated so deeply, and I've just been a fan ever since.
Have you read any other books on Stoicism, like by other authors and even recent ones who are focused on Seneca and Aurelius and these kind of guys?
Yeah, I've read most of the stuff by Seneca. I've read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius.
Very cool.
I've read a couple others from the ancient philosophers. I can't remember the names of the books. Epictetus Discourses, I think maybe is one of his books or collections, and then a bunch of books on non-Stoic philosophy but from other philosophy schools. And more recently I've read a little bit Ryan Holiday or Halliday, I forget.
Ryan Holiday,
Ryan Holiday, The Daily Stoic. I didn't actually see it through the whole year, but it's one of those great books I would pick up from time to time and just read a page of and appreciate. But I guess, for the most part, anytime I've tried to read a more modern take on a modern book on Stoicism, it's great, but it's like it doesn't really give me anything additional that the original texts hadn't already explained, and I like to go back and just reread those if I was going to read more.
And the language is somehow more powerful as well.
It's just beautiful. Like Seneca especially, he's got a real poetic way of writing, and obviously it's not in the original text. It's all translated by interpreters, but for the most part, when they do a good job, they get through the poetic nature of the speech or the text and the cadence of it, and it's really is just beautiful. And there's something so much more powerful about something written 2,000 years ago that still resonates today versus something written today, even if it's quoting the stuff that's older. It's just
I don't know if you're
The whole
hearing
book.
that. Please excuse the dogs outside. They're going a little bit crazy.
No, can't hear it actually.
Oh, perfect, great. Well, hopefully the recording doesn't pick it up either, so that's good. Um, hey, so I'm curious because in my experience, people tend to pick up philosophy either through exposure to, mentors. Personally, I'll speak to where I heard about it for the first time was really through Tim Ferriss. Um,
Mm.
and the conversations with Ryan Holiday were some of my favorites, as well as with Balaji's. In fact, we can probably dive into that later as well. But Balaji's was one of the first people who got me onto pseudonymous identities and crypto in the first place. I actually was learning about pseudonymous identities before I even looked into Bitcoin, right? But we can talk about that later. So I'm curious, how did was there a turning point in your life where you decided you wanted to pick up philosophy? Has that always been a part of your life? Are your parents into it as well?
I wouldn't say my parents are not into it. It hasn't like been an active part of my life always, but I think I've always thought in a philosophical manner, so that when I did start reading and picking it up, it just instantly resonated. And I was like, oh, yeah, like these words are validating the way that I've thought already for my whole life. And like it just makes sense to me. And it was just a wonderful moment and experience for like, it was really just several months where I just really fell down the rabbit hole and consumed philosophy. And then, for several years later, I would continue to read and watch like pick up bits and pieces here and there. Um, I wouldn't say that there was necessarily a specific event or person that led me to it. Not that I can remember, at least. It was probably like a whole series of like little data points and pings over the course of my life, that someone recommended me that book and I bought it and I had it sitting on my bookshelf. I think one of my other good friends had read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, and he'd said, hey, it was a really great book. And I'm sure I saw um, other people talk about
Mm,
Stoicism, and I was
mm.
like, okay, yeah. And eventually I got around to reading it and was like, oh, yeah, okay, I get it.
I love it. I love it. Stoicism seems to keep coming up during times in like right now we have a lot of uncertainty in the air, right? Just like with the war, with changing technological revolutions, macroeconomics, and so people tend to look for something that keeps them balanced throughout, right? So I guess for anybody, and we'll start to move into another topic here, but for anybody who hasn't heard of Stoicism or talked about Stoicism, how would you kind of like wrap it up most succinctly? Like, here's what it is. It's tough to do, but like in your mind, what's the introductory piece, and where should they start?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Uh, to me, Stoicism is about understanding what is within your control and what is not within your control. And really, everything else stems from that. And one of the first things to sort of realize and try to do is uh, not allow your emotions and your mental state to become dramatically imbalanced for long periods of time due to things that are outside your control. Of course, it is totally normal. It's part of the human condition to get upset, to get angry, to be hurt, to be sad, to feel bad things. That's totally fine. Stoicism is not to not feel. It
Mm,
is to understand that, if something bad happens that you had no control over, that's life. That happens. It is useless, for lack of a better word, to dwell on that. Instead, think about, well, what is in your control? And that is your reaction to the events that happen to
mm,
you, basically. And it's basically every moment in life you get to choose how to react to the life that's happening to you and around you. And sometimes you react poorly if things get out of hand, if things happen very quickly, things that are very unexpected happen. But the goal is to react in a way that you want to, which is, generally feeling good and happy and stable and in control. And yeah, I mean that
I like
that that
I like
that's
it.
my succinct version. Yeah.
Fantastic. I guess this is a perfect segue. I spent a good part of my day yesterday, maybe half my work day, reading through your letters on Substack.
Hmm.
We'll include a link to that in the show notes as well, of course. But it really strike me as a person who's of course an avid reader and really passionate about your own personal development, but also kind of like a calm within the storm that is NFTs and Web3, right? There's a lot of emotional actors out there. There's a lot of, and you pointed me towards specifically infinite regret, which seems to have a
Mm.
huge resonance within the community. People buying an NFT, it not mooning, people not buying an NFT, it mooning, not
Yeah.
minting whitelist you had, and then it's for ETH. And of course, I think we all have those stories. So personally, here's my origin story. I got into NFTs when apes were at 1 ETH.
Mm.
Instead of buying an ape for 1 ETH, I bought 3 Astro Friends for 0.8 ETH each. And I don't know if you remember the Astro Friends.
So Elio Trades project?
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
of course that went to zero. I don't know how they're doing now or what's going on there. Um, but learned a lot, right? And so that was actually how I made my first friends in that Discord and how the collective was born. And
Mm.
here we are, sort of a year later, with endless learnings, endless new relationships, and beautiful friendships all over the world. And so, um, as I read through this, I guess there's a conversation that's to be had of how you see the space in general. I think typically it's attracted a lot of intellectually and financially pretty well developed people who potentially don't have that spiritual or philosophical background as you do. And it seems like people are naturally drawn to you, not just because of your fantastic insights into trading, but because of how often you speak about almost live and let live, right? And focusing on yourself and compassion and empathy. Could you speak to that a little bit more as well?
Yeah, I think you're right that for the most part, people are attracted, the people that are in this space and have been attracted, especially to crypto, but even NFTs have been, well, let's talk about crypto. Crypto attracted people that were into tech and finance. That was largely it. NFTs came along, and all of a sudden, sure, there's art, there's music, there's gaming, there's celebrity, there's community, there's memberships, there's all these other things, but they're very much still caked in tech and finance, and the vast majority of people come into the space to make money. And I think that there is not an enormous overlap in the Venn diagram of people that are very passionate about making money and who are more spiritually minded and maybe care less about material things. Uh, that said, I believe everyone understands the importance of spirituality, even if they don't refer to it as spirituality, the importance of mental health, of wellness, of, you
Mm,
know, kindness and empathy and being a good human. But they might not know how to talk about it or think about it or like, where to read about it. And especially in this space, it's not spoken about that much. I think it's spoken about more now compared to a year and a half ago when I was getting in. And so I think that as someone who was talking about, the mental health aspect to this space or to the just the Stoic philosophy and the approach that I would take, and talking about why, yes, it sucks to lose a lot of money or to not make a lot of money, but it's going to be okay, or why it totally lost my train of thought there. And so that resonated with people, and I think that really just sort of helped sort of grow the, I don't know, the Twitter following or whatever you want to call it.
absolutely. It's kind of that's, I'd be interested to touch into that as well, just because you do a bunch of advisory stuff. From what I've seen, I see your name pop up on all these different projects every now and then. When I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, look at this,
Hmm.
And so before we go on to that, in letter 29, you talk about expectations on founders, versus kind of the reality of the space. And I kind of added on to that, just like, the immaturity of the market as well in the developing tech, right? We haven't fully gotten to a point where it's a completely robust ecosystem. There's a lot of people just trying to build things and experiment. And that's really what it's about right now, right? And then you talked about balancing transparency with mystery. And I'd love to touch on that because I don't know how much time you've had to really check out the collective or what we're doing, but when I read through your journey of what you've done with the Zen Academy and the Zen 333 Club, it strikes me as very similar to our approach. The difference is, I think you did the NFT much sooner than we did. A few of our friends who've been there in the collective since the beginning kind of made the joke that we were one of the first alpha hubs, but the last to create our NFT. We still have it, right? And the reason we did that and we haven't done that till now, I never found a way to balance, and you'll see where I'm going in a second. I never found a way to balance. How do we keep this super curated and not diluted by opening the Discord to other people, whether that's the free aspect or the paid aspect? Because technically speaking, anybody with a bankroll can just buy the NFT, even if it's 10 ETH or 15 ETH or 20 ETH. And then if you don't know them, you haven't had the chance to vet them, it could affect the culture. There was a little bit of and let's call it as it is, there was a little bit of a fear mindset there that it would change what we had, right? But now, of course, we've come up with a little bit of a solution, which is we will open up the public part. People will be able to invite their friends, but they will still need to kind of, enthusiastically contribute before they earn their role within the collective, right? So it keeps that like, okay, well, hang on, let's see that you're actually dedicated to here to help each other out, whether you're a founder or an investor or you're just extremely talented in the space. So with that in mind, I'm thinking about all the things that we want to promise up front, and then there's, of course, as you speak about in your letter, talking about how you're going to be working on this for a very long time, and you don't necessarily know exactly where it's going to be 6 months or 6 years or even whatever from now, right? It's going to evolve, but you do kind of promise that you're going to put your all into it, right? And so I'm curious, how has that, I mean, that was a pretty recent letter, but I'd love to hear you speak on that a little bit. And when you're speaking to different projects, how you advise them on that balance.
Yeah, it's a really difficult thing to navigate and balance because we're still in the really early stages of experimenting and seeing what works and what doesn't. So I think it depends. Excuse me, it depends on the project, their goals, and the thing I always bring it back to, whether it's advising for a project or just whenever I ask people about what they're doing when they launch a project, it's why. It's like, why are you doing this? What are you hoping to achieve? Why are you launching an NFT? Why are you building a community? What is your goal? And I think that a lot of people often skip that step, and I think that it's really difficult to sort of make smart decisions if you haven't figured out why. And that doesn't mean you have to know what you're going to do 10 years from now, or your roadmap or your plans. It's just have this like basic North Star or this plan or idea. It could be to experiment. It could be to have fun. It could be to meet new people. It could be to build a IP brand. It could be to launch a game. It could be whatever. Could be to be an alpha community. There's a million different whys. It's just making sure that you know what it is. And then sort of working backwards from there and thinking about, in terms of like setting expectations and what to be transparent and disclose and totally, tell people everything versus what to hold back to have that little bit of mystery and suspense and intrigue. I don't know what the correct balance is or what the answer is. I don't think anyone does yet. I've seen almost the entire spectrum, and no way works better than the other. It's like, it's just, you can't objectively say that. Like, there's projects that have been completely transparent and said exactly what they're going to do and laid out the exact value proposition, and like that, none of them really thrived and flourished. And then there's been projects that have been completely mysterious, but then half of those end up being rug pulls, and like that model doesn't work. And I think the right balance is somewhere in the middle. And to me, I'm a big fan of under promise, over deliver.
Yeah.
However, if you do too much of that, sometimes people aren't interested because you're not promising anything. But it's a good philosophy, I think. And my approach and kind of what I'm planning to do, especially going forward with Zen Academy, is be very open and transparent and honest about everything. Uh, and then surprise and delight on top of that. And just like finding ways to like set fairly low expectations, meet them, and then add surprising delights. So then people might be wondering, oh, are they going to do something else in the future? Look at they did this. And we're not adding fire to the flames. We're not necessarily saying, ooh, wait till you see what's coming in 4 months, or we have this big announcement coming on the weekend. I mean, honestly, we experimented with that a little bit around June, where when we first announced that we are going to do a PFP project, there was a bit of, we said, hey, we're going to take a snapshot and we have this stuff coming. And we made an announcement with like a bunch of redacted text, build a bit of hype and excitement. And it kind of worked and it was fun. And I definitely see the merit to it, but I just don't think it's on brand for us. And I think that I'm really actively looking for, as we move forward, to just be a lot more transparent and like, definitely people enjoy mystery and digging in and finding out hidden gems and Easter eggs. But I think there's a way to do that while still being very honest and while not playing these marketing hype games that so many projects play. But yeah, it's a very fine line.
Let's dig into that a little bit, actually. So I think, you get a lot of opportunities to speak to founders and develop plans and around their IP and their launch and their ongoing development. How do you look at marketing? Because there's been a few different. It's weird, right? We've only been doing NFTs for a year and a half or so, but it feels like there's been different eras, right? There was the era when the apes minted and the cool cats and the gutter cat gang and there was like 2 or 3 projects minting a week. It was really easy. You could just like look at 2 or 3 of them and go, which one's the best one? I'll mint that one, like. And then there was all the other mints, and there was the derivatives, and then there was the women-led project, and there was the GameFi, then free mints. And anyway, all that bit to be said, the marketing evolution has also changed, right? There's been a little bit of marketing to each other's communities over and over again, trying to pull that same liquidity. And then there's some people trying to onboard their own communities, kind of like how Boss Beauties did. I know you wrote about them as well, and that you hold a substantial amount of those. How many do you hold now? Has that increased as well?
To be honest, I genuinely don't know. It's somewhere between 20 and 60.
That's a wide range. I love it. I love it.
Is.
So how do you look at marketing these days? And that's like how long's a piece of string kind of question. But there's of course the traditional sort of organic way. But what if a project's coming in from zero? They don't necessarily have any of the Web3 contacts or the alpha channels. They've seen the other projects that have paid a bunch of influencers to do retweets, and they've gotten their Twitters and Discords botted. What would you say to them coming into the space with a little bit of context that, let's say they come in with really strong Web2 track record, but they have no idea how to do Twitter. They've never had a Discord before. Now they're trying to do a Web3 project. What would you say to them?
Yeah, I would say it's probably going to take you several months to build up a presence and community to be in a position where you're likely ready to launch. And that's because building a community organically is the best way. Paid marketing really doesn't work in the NFT space. 9 times out of 10, well, half the time you get scammed and like nothing happens. And then 9 times out of 10 that the person posts something, it has no impact. Half the time out of 10, it has a negative impact. Actually, more than that, it just doesn't really work for the most part, with minor exceptions. So the most important thing for any project in the space, but especially say a project that has strong Web2 founders, but are brand new to Web3, is for them to understand the culture. And I think that there's no way to do that without spending a significant amount of time in the weeds to like learn. There's a whole new language. You need to know the lingo. You need to know the vernacular. You need to know, um, you know, which projects are memes and why, and which projects are legit and why, and you know which projects have founders that the community thinks are shady, and which projects do communities love the founders of, and all of that stuff. And there's no like either you got to hire people in the space to be part of your team as like a significant core part of the team, to be community managers, marketing, head of marketing, growth, all of that, where you really round out your team with people who have already spent 6 months, 12 months in the space, understanding the culture. Or as the founders, you yourself need to just spend that time, you know, listen to podcasts, watch YouTube videos, hang out in Twitter spaces, spend your weekends in Discord, like just live, breathe this space. There's no substitute, no shortcut. Aside from that, like if you don't do that, you're 99% likely not to succeed. There's always the 1%, you know, exception to the rule,
Sure.
but for the most part, you're not gonna be able to do it. And then
Learn by immersion.
it is learn by immersion, and you know, see what other communities are doing right, and you know, come up with your own new ideas, and like build out your own personal network. And I think that is such an underrated thing that not almost no one, but like a lot of founders and people in the space don't do enough of. It's just like networking. It's just, you know, it's got a negative connotation, but in web 2 or 1 or 0, networking is, you know, stuffy events at conferences and listening to 90-minute lectures. In web 3, it's vibing in Discord and degenning into free mints together, and like you get rugged together, and it builds these bonds that it's impossible to replicate. And then, you know, if you've built this community and this network, and then one of you goes to launch a project, now all of a sudden these people are happy to support you and spread the word. And you know, that's not necessarily going to be enough to launch, to get a project to success. But if you then you know, have a unique idea, if the NFT project or whatever it is adding value to the space, if it's doing something innovative, if it's pushing the needle, all of these things combined can really, that's how you bring success. But yeah, there's no substitute. Like if someone's trying to go from 0 to a successful launch, you would need months or luck, a lot of luck.
I like that.
Usually both, honestly.
You know, I you started that with nobody's an expert yet, and I really like that. And then you start with like actually building connections and real degenning, and it was kind of nostalgic remembering the first 6 members of the collective things and going, oh no, that was a rug. It was like, no, how much did you put into that? It's like, oh no. And then I, you know, I distinctly remember, I don't know if you you know the Blue Ape Yankov. He was one of the first 6 members, and he came in. We were looking at koalas one day. We're all in voice chat. It's like maybe 7 a.m. on a Saturday morning for me, and he's in Germany drinking, just like hammered. And he's like, another guy, B Smokes, the founder of DGen Moon Friends, comes up and he goes, guys, man, these koalas are great. You know, do you remember when koalas were really pumping? Koala intelligence.
I do, but like I'm trying to go which koala project, because
yeah,
I can think of like 3 different ones. Yeah. Koala Intelligence Agency, is that the one you're thinking of?
Yeah, the one with J3 and Lacoste used to be on it. I don't know if you know those 2 guys.
Yeah, Lacoste is in the 333 club, and I've chatted with him a bit.
Oh, nice, cool.
He's great.
He's now doing the Move Fitness, right? So he
so the one of the founders on that, Tonka Try, he's one of the very first members of 333, and we chatted, I think, weekly for a long time. I really like him. It's a lovely person.
It's a small world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you know, there's a few things here. I took some notes down. You know, I want to talk a little bit about the concept of universal brand equity, activating ambassadors, helping people become like, you know, have you ever read 1,000 True Fans by Kevin Kelly?
I have not, but I've heard about it a lot, and I've thought about it, and yeah, it makes so much sense.
And Web3 just like seems to empower that on a whole nother level. But and we can dive into that. But
100%.
I've also lost my train of thought there a little bit after we talked about KIA. There we go, KIA. We were on the voice chat early in the morning one morning, and Beast Mode was like, yeah, we should buy this. You know, I talked to Lacoste, he's great, and he's on the team. He's not the founder, but he's on the team, and we should buy it. I'm really bullish, and I think koalas were at like 0.5 at the time, and they had a high
Mm.
1 ETH. And so we were like, yeah, that seems like a 50% correction. We should do it. And then they all start
Mm.
buying NFTs. And Yankov goes, which one are you guys getting? To me and my co-founder, my girlfriend Bella, and she goes, and we go, we're tapped out right now. And bearing in mind, we'd met this guy 2 weeks ago, and we've had
Mm.
2 weeks of calls, and he just goes, "Oh, I just sent you 1 ETH," and ETH was at like I think 4,300 at the time. And so
Wow.
this complete degen we just met was like, here, if you make a profit, great. If I see some of it back one day, great. If we lose money and I don't get it back, great. I'm sending this to you so you can buy some koalas and be a part of this journey. I'm like, I'd never seen that kind of behavior outside of
Yeah.
three, right? And so it's there's a lot of camaraderie and people lifting each other up. It's beautiful to see. Um, cool, man. Let's dive into team, because you mentioned teams before, and for founders to hire people from the from the space. How do you look at that? And what were your first priorities to build your team? Have you got like a substantial size team? Have you kept it small? Love to hear some of your thoughts on how you look at that.
Yeah. So
I'm just
what are
gonna
we in?
let the dog out.
Uh August. It's the month of August. It's August. A year ago, it was just me. So it's crazy. Now I have 18 people part of the team. So
Wow.
it's been a ridiculous year. And I was, I have also, like, my background, we haven't really touched on this. Prior to NFTs and Web3, I was a professional poker player
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that was it.
I'm
I
looking
did high
forward to
school
getting
and
to that
that.
part. Yeah.
So I've never worked at a job, a traditional job. I've never been part of a company. I've never had a boss. I've never been a boss. I've never been part of a team. This is all new for me. Learning from just the very beginning, from learning to delegate, like that was very difficult for me. And then figuring out how incredibly powerful it is to delegate and find people who can do things better than you can do, and getting the right people to fill those roles. Um, I I guess the first sort of quote unquote hiring began just finding people within the Discord to be volunteer mods. This was well before I even sold an NFT. It was just I launched the Discord and it started growing, and I was like, all right, I'm going to need some help moderating. Is anyone interested? And just put the call out, and a bunch of people started. And then at a certain point, I realized that I needed to make someone a community manager to give them more permissions and roles when I'm asleep, like basically, and to take over a little bit more of the duties. And so that was technically my first hire, Tony. And he was one of the very first people in Discord, and he's a mod and very active and super helpful and incredibly nice guy, and very much still part of the team now. He handles all events for Zen Academy, basically, and more. Um,
And for
and
events
then it was
on and off chain, or online.
mostly online,
Yeah.
but he definitely, like at NFT NYC, he was a big help there as well, and he's definitely will be helping more in offline events. Actually, no, he does help offline, because we now have this global events channel where we help organize events around the world for community members, and he's integral in that. So
You
yeah,
guys have
both
to
on
come
and
to
offline.
NFT Valley next year. Did you see? Did I send you a video of last year's one? Last May?
I don't think so. No, when is it next year?
In May. So we run a 31-day event, and
That's a long event.
yeah, it was insane. It was a lot of fun. People flew in from all over the world. But I cut you off there. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Community
Right, yeah.
Tony was fun.
Yeah, he's amazing. He was the first, and then as time went on, I started to find a need to bring more people in, and it was always basically I never actively went out, actually, with one exception. Somewhere along the way, I think maybe it was prior to the NFT launch, but after I had the Discord and Tony, I was just personally getting overwhelmed with the number of projects I was in and staying on top of stuff. And I was like, I need sort of like an assistant, someone to help make sure that I don't miss mints and free claims and mintless opportunities and airdrops and all that kind of stuff. On top of other things. So I said, all right, I need to find I'd never hired anyone. I was like, all right, an intern, a Zentern, a paid position, obviously. I put out a Google form on Twitter, and I got like, I don't know, 300 applications, and was
How
like,
big was
okay,
your Twitter following back then?
it would have
Roughly,
been
roughly. Yeah.
somewhere between 50 and 100,000
Okay.
followers. Maybe, yeah, 50 to 75,000. And so that was crazy. And then eventually whittled that down to 6. And then I had 6 or 7. I had a video call with everyone and hired Tom Zumo to be my Zen turn, ostensibly. And at that point, like early on, we'd have a call every single day and just chat about what was going on. He quickly started handling like some collabs for Zen Academy and stuff like that. As we launch into that. But aside from that, I'm fairly certain I've never actively put out a call to like find someone for a role. It has always been like from within. So the team now, we have uh 18 people, 8 mods, paid mods, and then me and 9 other core team members from head of operations, head of marketing, head of content, head of partnerships, head of collabs, um, head of events, and head of technology or chief technical officer. We have,
Very nice.
roles are very wishy-washy, but we've now got a core team, and it has always been just people who are part of the community already. Like
Yeah.
most of the team was a mod at one point, or was a community member who just either they reached out and was like, "Hey, I'm interested in doing more," or I noticed them and reached out to them and was like, "Hey, are you interested in doing more?" But for the most part, it happened very organically, and that created a team that really understood the culture and ethos of Zen Academy and what we were doing, because they were already organically drawn to it. And there's been, as far as I'm aware, zero friction in terms of team members working with one another. Me with team members, it's been very cohesive, and people, up until now, have just been wonderful. And so, yeah, it's been I would say, a really interestingly organic process over the
Mm.
course of a year. I I'm really shocked when I think that there's 18 of us now, or 9. I don't know. There's like
Congratulations
two
to
or
you and the
three.
team.
Yeah, thank you. It's wild. And then there's like 2 or 3 that are like part-time contractors, freelancers that do a couple of bits and pieces here and there. Um, yeah, like I wonder if, for the most part, most people are part-time now and have been part-time the whole way as well. It's like we weren't necessarily in a position to say, all right, this is a great opportunity, leave your stable full-time job and come jump aboard the ship. Although now we're at that point where we're sort of transitioning to bringing a few people on very much full-time, and feeling comfortable that we'll be able to like sustain ourselves as a business and grow and everything. But up until recently, it's been very much part-time, and
Mm.
it's just been really interesting, growing at this really slow pace where it's like
Slow,
it's
organic,
not
consistent.
slow organic. Yeah. um yeah, honestly, it's been great. I sometimes wonder, would it have been different if like a year ago or like 10 months ago I just found 2 or 3 people and like brought them on full time, and we just like full on went, all right, let's now grow this and be from there. I think that might have worked as well, but I think we could have very quickly spiraled into a direction that I wouldn't have loved. So,
And
and given
life happens for you, not to you, right? And then this almost
exactly,
back to your most read letter, the infinite
yeah,
regret, right? So
yeah. I'm so happy with where we are now. That funny thing about that letter, it's easily the most read one I've written and most referenced, and I I really like it a lot. Myself, the idea of regret though is something I'm not fully on board with. Like I use it a lot, and like, all right, you sold something too early, regret, sure, you feel that, but when you think about it, if you're happy in the present, then everything that's happened up until now, you can't really think of that as a regret, because they all led to the state that you're in now. So I don't really think of having regrets, but it reads nicely.
absolutely. And it's like even we could even touch on I've been homeless twice in my life, and almost third time before I was given my first shot by a gorgeous man named Daniel. He gave me my first opportunity in commission only sales role when I was 20 years old. Um, and the rest is history. I sort of built a career off that and got into finance, got into everything else. But hey, it is what makes you who you are today, and everything that's happened along the journey. If it hadn't happened, wouldn't give me the perspective or the insight that I have today. I would have never learned about Zen Buddhism. I would have never learned about Stoicism. Like, those things sort of gave me a lot of strength and perspective to within myself, and even to the rest of the world, and why people behave the way they do, right? And so, man, I want to dive into a few other things. You mentioned collabs, and Tom, and you mentioned Tony, and it brings up a point I already had here, which is universal brand equity. Let's touch on that, and then I'd like to take a couple minutes for both of us to maybe go get some water and whatever, and then we'll keep going and we'll edit that part. We'll stitch it together. But yeah, man. So for a little context, I say something quite often, and you may have heard it around. I think we've moved from the era of competition to the era of collaboration, right? And so we now live in a world where previously the world was kind of divided into two groups of people. I saw them as like founders and investors, and then customers and employees, right? Even if you were employee number 7 at Uber, or you were the first driver at Uber, you wouldn't never, not like today, you could be the first one earning Uber tokens, you're just paid that hourly rate, whereas these founders and investors become absolute billionaires, right? And so
Yeah.
it's not even that these founders and investors are greedy or they're bad people. It's just that the system's broken, right? So we're now in a position where brand ambassadors or your 1,000 true fans can come in. They can do things in a meaningful way, where they can do the things they're good at, that they enjoy doing, and rise together. As JFK says, and I know the Web3 space loves to say it now: a rising tide lifts all ships. How do you and your team look at collaborations? What kind of collaborations are you often on the lookout for? Because I'm sure you get, bombarded all the time. What does that look like? If you could speak to that, and let's dig in.
Yeah. First of all, I totally agree. And I think that one of the beautiful things about Web3, this whole creator economy, is it's so much more collaborative than competitive. And collaborating really does create, there's so many like win-win-win situations and win-win-win-win-win-win situations in this space. It's amazing. Hopefully it stays this way. Who knows where we'll be in 10 years, but it's really powerful, the possibilities here. In terms of collabs, there's two different types of collabs we look at, and it wasn't until recently that we applied these like Web 2 terms to it, but it's B2B and B2C. And so like B2C is business to customer, I think consumer. Again, I'm not from the business world. Where that's what we look at, like any sort of collab that can basically any sort of mint list giveaway. Like, projects are always saying, hey, we have 100 spots to give out, 20 spots to give out. Are you interested? Sometimes it's projects approach us, sometimes we approach projects, and we actually have we call it collab council. It's a group of like, it kind of rotates, but like 5 to 9 community members, headed up by Tom, who handles that, that will review all potential collabs for the community for like any mint list giveaways. And people can apply and fill out a Google form. It goes into a spreadsheet, and then they look at it and be like, is this something we want for Zen Academy? Is it and the generally largest metric is this going to add value to our community members? Is this something that a community would want? There is less overall concern about like aligning ourselves with projects or brands that we necessarily vouch for, and we very much disclaim that just because we run a giveaway, it's not something that we vetted or endorsed. Or we will look into it a little bit, and then we try to avoid any sort of rug pulls or bad projects. And for the most part, like 99% of the time, we do. Occasionally one will slip through. And then also that Tom does have final say, and occasionally there'll be like a project that's very just not in line with our brand vision, and we'll just decide not to run it, even if the community is interested in it. So that's that like mint list collab side of things. And that's, I don't know how many we run a week, maybe 4 to 8 a week, 3 to 12. It depends on a bull or bear market. And yeah, obviously some are valued a lot more than others. And then The other side is like I would say the B2B, the bigger partnerships, and that's where we work with other projects. A lot of the time it's like services where maybe they can give us a discount to our community members or access to tools, or yeah, discounts is a big part, maybe occasionally in real life benefits. And we're a lot more careful about those, and we generally prefer to only align ourselves with projects that we believe in and add value to our community, but also add value to the space, and aren't like, don't have predatory pricing tactics or anything like that. And then, God, I lost my train of thought again. And oh, we also try, like, we don't mind offering three different types of the same service, like in terms of uh if three different products are competing against each other, we're sort of agnostic to that. And if our community can get value from, say, a data analytics tool or platform, we'll offer it to them. But occasionally, if we do something that's an even greater partnership that we're, say, promoting on Twitter or YouTube, or it's very rare, then we'll be mindful not to like also the next day go and talk about a competing project, even though it is everyone wins space. We're like a little bit sensitive to that, but next month we're happy to do that. And that's the gist of it. And at this point, like, I spend maybe half an hour a week on those things. It's my wonderful team members who take care of all of that. Yeah.
I really like that point. You said, Tom has final say. A lot of the top founders I speak with, they give a lot of flexibility, leeway, empowerment, and just a little bit of a boundary, and then they get out of the way, right? Like you're not it's very clear to me. When you said the word delegation, I started to wonder, especially because you mentioned, being a poker player, and we'll dive into this after our little break. But there's a very big difference between true delegation and delegation where you're just actually making the decisions on a day-to-day basis for every little micro thing that comes up, right? You're just managing everybody. And a lot of founders in this space seem to be to want to delegate and build teams, but they end up just being the decision maker over and over and over again. So this is a great sign for what you're building, and I'm excited to keep seeing what you guys are building. And for anybody out there who needs to learn a little bit more about delegation, I suppose the Stoicism helps. Controlling what you can control, what you can't control, and allowing yourself to kind of step back, being okay to whatever outcome happens, right? Non-attachment to outcome, as long as you've done the right thing. It surprises me. I knew you were a poker player through some of your letters and through the things you talk about on your Twitter, but I didn't know that you didn't really do anything else besides that. And you did it for 15 whole years. How old were you when you started?
17. So like last year of high school is when I started playing poker, and went to university. Actually dropped out of university 3 times, different points. That's a whole other thing. But doing? So originally, the goal was to do law. I did. So you're from Australia. Well, yeah, you're not from Brisbane, so you don't know how I got an OP score. Do you know what OP is? It's like, what's the Sydney version of
very good question.
The test at the end of year 12. Well, yeah, you might not know.
HSC. Yeah. I did
exactly.
High school. I was at the top of my class in a really good school, but then when my mom remarried, my stepfather kicked me out of home, and so it ended up, I had like uni dreams to go psychology, but I digress. It's about you today. So uni, you dropped out 3 times.
Yeah. I was gonna do, so I did commerce, and then I was 18 and playing online poker at the time, and I was making decent money, very good money for like an 18-year-old with 0 expenses to living at home. So I thought, obviously had very little interest in my classes and was playing poker on my laptop in classes. And so I said, well, there's no point just coming back here at all, turning up, and also continuing to pay or like rack up student debt for it. So after 6 months, I said, let me defer and follow this, travel, see how it goes. And I basically didn't go back for at least 10 years. I did for like literally 45 minutes, and then I quit again. But yeah, so that's
Same
what I did,
course?
and then beg your pardon, same course, yeah. Like I deferred for 6 months and then came back, and both basically, yeah, basically just because my mom wanted me to, and it was an introduction to accounting course, and the lecturer was teaching us how to use Microsoft Excel. And after 45 minutes of that, I was like, you know what, this no, and I left. And then yeah, just online poker for the most part. I did play some in person and traveled around a bit. That was all I did for basically 15 years. In 2000 and God, when was it? 16 or something. I was getting a bit over it. I had already been over it for a while, and I was looking for other things to do. And that's when I went back to law school, and I did that for about 18 months, but eventually again just lost interest and
Yeah.
went back to poker. Yeah.
This is super interesting to me. It's like institutional learning you weren't quite into it, but it seems very clear to me that you're um someone who's very keen on self-directed learning, and you're always improving yourself. Could you
Eh.
no, you don't think so? I mean,
No, I do. I
you
do like
a
that
lot of
as
reading.
well, but I certainly I go through like stints of self-improvement and then like long plateaus of just coasting along. And I don't hate or dislike institutional learning either. Like I really enjoyed like the first 6 months, 12 months of law school. I really enjoyed the last 1 to 2 years of high school. Like prior to that I didn't love it, but I like learning. It's just, and I like structured learning, and I like learning with others. It was just maybe the subject matter that didn't quite interest me
Sure.
as much, or it eventually got to a point where it didn't interest me. So then, yeah, I'll do things my own way, and yeah, got me
Ha-
to here.
Have you got brothers and sisters?
I do. I have an older brother and an older sister.
Oh, cool. Oh, so you're the youngest of three.
I am, yeah.
Ah, interesting. Did they end up on similar paths to you, or?
So yeah, so they're both quite a bit older. My brother is 9 years older, and my sister is 13 years older, so there's a big gap. My sister is an accountant. She did well at school. She went to university. She got a master's. She's now CPA, chartered accountant in San Diego. She's been working for Deloitte for 20 plus years. Very
Ah,
successful. I think
yeah.
she's direct partner or something there, maybe. She's done great. My brother is a professional golfer. So he went really like he did finish university, got a business degree, and then played golf professionally for long time, and is now coaching golf
Wow.
as not actively playing professional. And so he sort of like a little bit laid the groundwork for my parents to accept a not traditional career path. My dad accepted it a lot more easily and readily than my mom did. I mean, I'm sure she still wants me to go back and get my degree, but I think it's
Tell
not in the
us a little bit
cards.
about your parents and how you remember growing up.
Yeah, I was fortunate to have a great childhood, and my parents are wonderful. They they moved to Australia in the 70s, late 70s, before I was born, basically.
Sure.
They actually moved from, so my dad, they were born in India, born and raised in India, uh, although technically what is now Pakistan. Um, my dad moved to Germany when he was in his 20s. So he did engineering and came here for a job, and then married my mum. It was an arranged marriage, and he literally traveled back from Germany to India. He had a 6 week trip planned, and within that entire trip, he was going to find his wife, marry her, and then they would come back to Germany together, as was done back in those days in India.
Sure.
And yeah, so then they lived in Germany for I can't remember, like 4 to 7 years. I don't know exactly. My sister was born there, and from there they moved. I don't know if it was directly to Australia or back to India, but then it was a little bit of back and forth between Australia and India, but largely very much settled in Australia. I was born there. My brother was born there, and yeah, like my mum stay-at-home mum for a lot of it, but she worked, but for most of my childhood she worked at schools, so like, you know,
And your
had all
father?
the same time off. My dad, biochemical engineer, and
Interesting.
worked for the same company for like 50 years, and it was
Wow.
eventually like manager, and yeah.
Interesting. Wow. Super cool. The more you learn about people, I find it endlessly fascinating, people's journeys, and I guess that's why part of why I love what I do. Let's touch on a little bit more for the poker player part. What was what set you apart? Do you think you were a great poker player? I mean, you were able to do it and sustain your financial finances for 15 years, presumably, and you seem to have come into this space in NFTs and Web3 with a little bit of capital behind you, at least. Tell me a little bit about that and how that maybe has helped your journey in Web3.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't consider myself a great poker player, but that is in relation to the cohort of professional poker players that are able to remain professional poker players and make a living for 10 plus years. There are, I would say, 80% of peers and friends, maybe 90%, that I knew along the way dropped off to go back to school, to find another job, because they couldn't continue to make money playing poker. So take that for whatever it is. I I was able to sort of stay ahead of the game, stay ahead of the game enough, and play in the right games and the right volume, and be able to sustain myself and make a decent living for 15 years. And I always say that it takes such an interestingly and just a unique set of skills and personality traits to be successful as a poker player. It is absolutely not intelligence. Like, there are people I know that are just objectively far more intelligent than me about far more things than me, that are terrible poker players and could not succeed. I think it's just this interesting mishmash of some amount of intelligence and usually mathematical abilities, and some amount of psychology, and some amount of like the right temperament, and not like getting emotionally tilted too much every time you lose, and like figuring that part out is a difficult part. um the mental game to poker is enormous, and yeah, the ability to sort of like adjust quickly and keep up with new trends and learn new things. It's this random weird hodgepodge of skills that I fortunately had and was able to sustain. um but I never like broke into like that upper echelon top tier. And I think maybe it was because I didn't have that risk appetite that maybe you need to take giant risks, and or
Oh,
just wasn't as successful as just good or as driven
sure.
enough to just play enough to like go to the higher stakes. um but yeah, it was a fascinating journey, and I really loved most of it. It definitely became a grind eventually, though.
So, a common theme in this conversation so far that we've touched on a couple of times is emotional EQ, or emotional balance, and the ability to keep your internal world balanced despite what's going on externally. In one of your letters, you allude to a little bit of coaching,
Mm.
right? Am I mistaken there, or is that? Could you correct
No,
me?
I had a mental game coach in
Uh-huh.
poker. Uh, Jared Tendler is his name. He actually wrote two books, The Mental Game of Poker. Then he wrote one, The Mental Game of Trading. I actually had him on my YouTube channel a few months ago, which was great to reconnect with him after many, many
Mhm.
years. Um, yeah, he helped tremendously in sort of understanding. It was almost like a precursor to Stoicism in a way. It's like
Yeah.
understanding some of the things about like what's in your control and what's not, and aligning your emotions with the things that are in your control rather than things that are outside your control. And a lot of those learnings are very applicable to NFTs and crypto and life. And it was a huge learning process, and I was, I definitely nowhere near the mental state that I'm in now 10 years ago as a poker player. So I was kind of all over the place, and was still fortunate enough to be able to make enough money from it to survive. But um, yeah, it's a huge part of it.
Do you still play poker? And if so, let's how about we do a poker night during NFT Bali, hosted by Zeneca?
So I don't really, and I don't miss it at all. The only poker I've played in like 18 months now really has been an occasional poker night that we run in Zen Academy. Like we do two a week, and
Oh,
occasionally I'll find the time to play. Actually, when we first started, I was there at all of them. I actually created all of them using the app and everything, and now Tony does it. Um, I I don't miss it, but it is a really fantastic game, and I would like to play again. I'm going to be in Vegas in October for a Web3 conference,
oh,
so pretty
excellent.
decent chance I play just for funsies. Yeah,
I like it for funsies. And so
yes, yeah.
Vegas, I've never been. I've actually never been to the States. I've always sort of stayed on this side of the world, gone to Europe and done a lot of that. Next time I'm in Munich, I'm going to have to come say hello. Next time you come to Bali, we'll take care of you. Have you been to Bali before?
I have almost 10 years ago now, which is crazy.
Wow, it's all changed. It's all changed.
Yeah,
It's crazy
I'm
how
sure.
things will change.
I really loved it though. It was beautiful.
Mm.
Yeah.
Let's dive in and we'll start to get to our final topics and questions. And um, I just want to touch on as well how amazing you guys did with the hack that happened on your Twitter account. 13 minutes. It took
That was
13
crazy.
minutes for everybody to just to shut it all down. That's phenomenal. I don't think I've seen anybody do it faster. Um, a huge testament to the quality of people in your community. And I really like the part where you write about personal responsibility and safety nets, right? And without going too deep into it, maybe you want to just touch on there, how important it is for people to get their own responsibility these days, because we're moving away from, like you said in your letter, um, recover my password and this era of the internet to, well, we're not
Mm.
going to baby you. You're your own adult and your own person. So speak to that a little bit, and then we'll dive into one of the surprising delights
Hmm.
I found through Tony Benn's speech, which I have to say thank you for. But please, riff on that a little bit.
Yeah. It's a really interesting dichotomy between personal responsibility and self custody of your assets and onboarding newcomers to the space. And I think that it's a really difficult thing to comprehend and understand that level of responsibility. And I think that we'll never go mainstream and fully onboard large amounts of people and casual users until we have figured out better infrastructure, better wallet setups, better safety nets for a long time. Like the average user is just not going to be able to understand and comprehend full custody of their digital assets, especially if those assets become significantly valuable. At least not for, I would say, a generation, maybe two, like
Sure.
until that is like born in. Um, so when my Twitter was hacked, it had been a string of like many hacks had been occurring around that time. Our Discord is actually the 333 Club Discord was hacked back in April. It happens all the time in the space,
Yeah.
and different people and teams have different responses. It's do you reimburse people for lost assets or not? And for a long time, a lot of people and projects were doing it, and it became a bit of a trend, and it makes some sense. It definitely makes some sense. Like, you
Sure.
feel really bad, and I felt awful. And like when a Discord got hacked, felt awful. People, through often some sort of fault of the is ultimately it's the person clicking the link that
Of
signs a
course.
transaction. It's their ultimate fault. But if the person had, like, let's say I had lacked security in my Twitter account or in Discord, it was one of us team members who had their account socially compromised, you feel some responsibility as well. Now, I had, to my mind, very advanced security on my Twitter account, so I'm a little perplexed as to exactly how it got hacked still. But anyway, I'd been thinking about it for a while, and I think a lot of others have been talking about it as well. It's is it right to compensate people for lost assets? And while it feels good, does it, it feels good to you to do it, kind of, it feels great for the people who lost assets. Is it a good precedent to set, and especially going forward? And I ultimately decided it was not. For various reasons. One being that certainly a lot of the attackers had now been perpetrating as victims themselves and effectively double dipping on the assets. That's a big reason. The second is that ultimately it is about personal responsibility and ensuring the safety of your own assets. And it's if we create this culture or foster this culture of reimbursing people all the time, then perhaps people won't take that personal security as seriously. And then the other thing was, I felt like I took sophisticated and sufficient steps to secure my account. I had two-factor authorization on, using Google Authenticator, and it still happened. And I would say it was also my personal account and not a company account or company website, which is slightly different. All of these things. And so, yeah, that's how I came to that decision and conclusion, and I stand by it. And I think the community largely accepted it. And there's a little bit of backlash, but mostly accepting. Yeah.
Like what we kind of just opened the door to the precedent of, like, putting a bunch of people in a community, getting them hacked on, like, be in cahoots, and then getting them reimbursed, and then through all the decentralized wallets they can get their assets back anyway, and then it just turns into this whole thing where it can be socially engineered to be all kinds of things, right? Like, but yeah. Just in my mind, let's take 100 people, maybe 10 of them are in cahoots with the hacker, and they're the only 10 who hit the phishing link. What would that world look like as well, right? And so,
yeah.
Awesome, man. We'll let's dive into how you look at revenue streams for Zen Academy. Because you've been building your team, and you mentioned that you're scaling, and it's kind of solidifying. How do you look at that? Like, what a lot of people struggle with monetization models. I think they're trying to reinvent the wheel here in Web3. A lot of my mentors have kind of taken a look at it and realized, there's nothing really new under the sun. It's just been reskinned and better technology now with decentralized ledgers. So business is still business, value is still value, and people will pay for value. How do you look at revenue streams in your business, and how do you look at just even the term value?
Yeah. Term value is like, there's a lot there. I'm going to touch on revenue streams. I think when I launched Zen Academy, it was an experiment. And I think that I said as much at the time. And basically, I had been creating a lot of content and enjoying it. And I wanted to do more of that and do more on the education side. But I was trying to figure out, how can I monetize? And I was doing advising as well. I was like, how can I monetize my time effectively? And the Web2 model is to, I had a newsletter, and it was like, all right, turn it into a paid newsletter, get sponsors in, get advertisers in, launch a Patreon, and all of that kind of stuff. And I said, well, that's Web2. Well, let me launch an NFT. That's Web3, and give certain perks and access and benefits. And that's what I did. And, raised a decent amount of ETH, and was able to use that to pay myself living costs and salary, and hire and scale and pay running costs for the business. Not that significant for a while, but then we put on live events, and great, like, it worked well. And then secondary market royalties have been modest, again, enough to sort of cover expenses for the most part, give or take. Bear market has not been great, but I always knew from the beginning, this is not a sustainable model forever, and for two reasons. One is, if a membership to Zen Academy raises in floor price to a certain point, it's going to be prohibitive for new people, so we need a cheaper entry for them. Secondly, we might not be generating that much on secondary market royalties, especially if there's not much volume, because incentives are not aligned if people are selling. The goal is to not have people sell. So then I said, well, maybe eventually one day we'll have like a yearly subscription option. And I said that at the beginning as well, so people were aware that that might be a possibility. We've not implemented anything like that yet. It's something that we might do. Over the last few months, I've been growing increasingly and acutely more aware that secondary market royalties seem like less of a reliable revenue source. Absolutely. And so to consider alternatives. there are a few alternatives. One is to just release new NFTs
Yeah.
and do another
Sure.
drop, and that's something we have been actively planning for a long time. It's like the whole PFP project side of
Sure.
things. Obviously driving a lot of the value back to the original token holders, but perhaps expanding the ecosystem in a value additive way, and creating some fun involved in that whole process.
Mm-hmm.
But as a business, exploring other revenue streams, and that is where I think advising and consulting is something that is really just the perfect match for Zen Academy,
Yeah.
where I believe we can turn into like a
Yeah.
consulting heist. Yeah. Like I personally get one a day, one request to be an advisor for a project every single day, uh, at least. And, I basically, for pretty much all of 2022, I'd been saying no, like because I didn't have the time or capacity, and
Sure.
I've been working on Zen Academy and doing other things. But now I'm trying to explore that and, take on more jobs like that and try to come up with a system where other people can also be advisors under the Zen Academy umbrella in exchange for, that we will get a cut of the revenue. They will get support and help from us in finding the jobs and, and resources in maintaining them and
Mm-hmm.
relationships and all that kind of stuff. There are additional services we can branch out to, Discord audits, contract audits, developers, artists. There's a whole suite of things. Marketing help is something a lot of people are looking for.
Yeah.
That's a whole additional revenue stream that is not reliant on our community buying tokens or selling tokens or revenue. So it's totally separate, and we can funnel that. We can use that to pay the employees or pay the salaries of people. We can use that to funnel back into the community and
Yeah.
do cool things for our holders. So that's a big thing we're moving towards, and then exploring advertising again, or sponsorship for like we have like this whole media arm now. I have my newsletter. We have 2 podcasts. We have a YouTube channel. We have a 3rd podcast launching. We have a new newsletter launching. All this stuff. We're reaching large amounts of people. I've been like largely reluctant to bring on any sort of paid advertising up until now, but I think there are ethical ways and value additive ways to do it where if you
Absolutely.
believe and your values align with the company and you think that your audience might appreciate it, and ideally you can even offer something to your audience, a discount, then it's kind of win-win-win, and they could pay us. And yeah,
Absolutely.
so that's another revenue model that doesn't
Sure.
require our community buying or selling tokens.
I like that. Have you met Shan from Project Gajira?
Not really. We've chatted a little bit online, but not much.
I I will be recording a podcast with him too. I think that's an episode you're gonna like. We had an introductory conversation last week. It was supposed to be a like 15-minute conversation turned into a 45-minute conversation. He strikes me as someone who is on a similar wavelength to me. I've kind of always said that the NFT part or the is like the initial raise. And like we're very often approached to advise projects or take on projects into our accelerator or incubator. And the first question I ask them is, what's their business model? And how they're going to make money. And they go, sell NFTs. And I go, okay, yeah, but then how are you going to make money off the back of that and generate like actual brand value? And 95% of the time they have no idea, and that's immediately like okay, well, no, we're not working together, right? You got to figure out a niche, who your target market is, what they want, what their pain points are, how you're going to solve it, and how you're going to be paid for that, right? And so Shan is someone who strikes me as super interesting because he's already developed, at least from what I counted, at least 8 revenue models. They've got the project, they got the Jira tank, which is kind of like Shark Tank, where they take equity and then they help support the project. They've got some metaverse plays, equity share there, and they seem to like spend very little money. More so, they spend time and expertise, and it seems like something you could very much be doing as well, in a meaningful way. And maybe that's a conversation, and another can of worms we should explore another time. Super cool, man. It seems like you've built a really cool foundation, and now you've just got plenty of opportunities and choices to make, and the hardest decision will be which one to do and which not to do. I'm sure you can relate. It's more important now what you say no to than it is what you say yes to.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. I'm just we're gonna start to wrap up here because I'm mindful of your time. I think we've technically only got 6 minutes left. Are you jumping into another call immediately? How are we?
I will have to jump off in 6. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's see if we can do some rapid fire things and wrap this up. And I'm going to speed up the conversation here. And clearly, we're going to have an episode 2 at some point. Maybe we do it
Would
internally
love that.
to a live audience. NFT Bali. Just going to gauge your response. Do you want to be part of it? Would it be cool to have Zen Academy there? The model we do is we have sponsors from the brands. The brands pay. Last year is 1, 3, or 5 ETH, so much more affordable than something like NFT NYC. Then all of your holders or anybody who has your NFTs gets free access basically to the whole event, all 31 days. And that's free drinks, free food, workshops,
Wow.
parties. And it was a whole lot of fun. And you know, we really try to showcase what it's like to live in Bali. Would you like to be a part of it? And if yes, as Zen Academy, would you also come yourself in person?
I would say sounds very interesting. I would like to hear more. Probably, I want to gauge how many people in our community would be probably attending.
Yeah.
I would love to attend. I love Bali. One of my team members is getting married in May in America, so I'm not sure how it works where I'll be living. But it is like the whole month thing, so
Exactly.
put me
Some
down for a strong
weeks,
maybe on
for a month.
both.
Strong maybe on both. Great. Well, I'll send you the recap video. Love for you to see it, and perhaps a cheeky ask. Maybe you even want to share it and get your community to check and see what they think of
Yeah.
it, right? And so that's the one question. I got two more. These are more broad. If you could wave a magic wand right now and you could get anything, meet anyone, or change something in the world, what would that look like?
Wow. Get anything, meet anyone, change anything in the world. That's a hell of a magic wand.
Yeah.
Um, I think. Oh no, that's not great. Um, I would. So much power and responsibility. Um, hmm. Maybe I'll go. Who would I like to meet? I mean, saving the world is appealing, but tough to do. You change one thing, you ruin everything else. Um, I would meet Eric Repair. He's a chef, and he's very deep into Buddhism and meditation, and I'm pretty sure Stoicism, and just seems like a wonderful human. So just love to meet him.
Super cool. I like it. Now I've got a whole host of questions to ask about that, but we won't have time. So episode 2. Final question. Any last pieces of advice? If you know, kind of similar to Tim's question, I really like the question. If you could have a billboard anywhere, the biggest billboard that millions of people would see, what would you put on it? Mine is, you know, if you could almost whisper in the ear of everybody in the NFT space or people getting into the NFT space. What's one final piece of advice you'd give them?
um, I mean, the piece of advice I always give to people getting into the space is like patience is a virtue, and just like be patient. But I think for a lot of people in the space already, um, there's this quote, and I put it in my newsletter. I can't remember exactly what it is, but I think a person's real wealth is how much they'd be worth if they lost all their money. And I think that is something that a lot of people in the NFT space and crypto forget or lose sight of. And yeah.
I like that, man. Appreciate it. This has been a fantastic, wide-ranging conversation. I appreciate you and your time. You know, thank you, and I hope your followers and our community and your community and the wider Web3 community enjoys this conversation, and the many more to come. You know, continue to be blessed, and when you're blessed, always remember to be a blessing and pass it on. Looking forward to future conversations, man, and one day potentially meeting in Bali or Vegas or Munich. So appreciate you.
Thank you so much. This has been a true pleasure. It's one of the most wonderful conversations I've had ever. Certainly in a while. Certainly on any sort of NFT related podcast. It's been great, very wide ranging, and I really appreciate it. So it's been a pleasure.
Means a lot, my man. Appreciate you. Ciao for now.